So what can buyers expect for used car prices in the coming year? Obviously, 2021 was a very unusual year for used car values and even new car values for that matter. But many used cars were worth more than they were as a new car, brand new, when they were sold 2-3 years prior. Here's a great article and graph from Black Book, which is one of the largest used car value guides. It tends to be slightly regional. The southeast part of the United States uses it quite a bit. And one of the pieces of information hidden away in this article talks about how the used car market for 8 to 16-year-old vehicles was a record 28% increase in 2021. And dealers are even having to look at older model years to purchase to find vehicles for their shoppers, for their buyers. And that 28% sales increase trend is continuing in 2021. The real headline of last week is the increase in 18 to 16-year-old vehicles, and it shows a chart here where all that's going. So think about it. 8 to 16 years, pick the middle of that, maybe a 12-year-old vehicle. You're talking a 2010 vehicle. And in the farther end of that range, you're talking vehicles in the 2000s, 08, 09, right? Those are old cars, and people are still buying them and paying big money for them. So what does that mean for you as a buyer? If you're in the market for a used vehicle, you may find that a dealer or a retailer is stretching back to find these older cars. It may be that the value is not going to be that great on those vehicles. The price is going to be so high that if you go forward a few more years and less miles, the difference in price might not be that great. The reason why dealers are buying these older cars is just to have something in their inventory to sell, even at a higher price. So as an example, you might find, let's say, a 2010 Toyota pickup, Toyota Tacoma, that might be $14,000, $15,000. But if you went to a 2015, you might be able to be at $20,000. So it's going to be more money, but the difference might not be that great based on the year and the mileage especially. So be aware that just because a dealer has on their lot vehicles of that era and that age, that the prices are spiking up. So you might not find such a value. Once you get into really new vehicles, 1 or 2 years old, 2020, 2021, now you might pay just as much for a new car. So they're talking about the sweet spot for pricing on older vehicles. As a buyer, you might find the sweet spot is maybe 5 to 8 years old, mid-teens era vehicles. Make sure you're checking miles and condition, obviously, and the title history of the vehicle. But for most buyers, that sweet spot is 5 to 8 years old right now. And going forward, in the coming years, 2023, 24, 25, it's likely going to be the same thing. And here's part of the reason why. Think about the new car market from 2021 and 2022. The inventory levels were dramatically lower. Some manufacturers sold less than half the volume, sometimes a quarter of the volume that they normally sell in a year in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, which means that there will be even that many fewer used cars from those years going forward. 5 years from now, it's going to be 2027. Somebody looking for a 5-year-old car is going to find 10 or 20% of the available inventory that normally would be available 5 years ago. So plan accordingly. If you own a vehicle and you're thinking maybe in 2 or 3 years you're going to sell it, think about what that market's going to be like. If you owned an older vehicle that's anywhere from 2004 to, let's say, 2010 or 11, now might be a time to sell that vehicle at a high price point, because the market is spiked up now. It may continue to stay high, but the price is probably not going to go up. It may decline at a lower rate, but the price is probably not going to go up. Now, the question comes up is, what about electric vehicles and hybrids? Are those seeing the same type of increase? Well, here is an example of that. Auto Remarketing, a great resource for automotive news and the used car market industry. Prices on used hybrids and EVs jump more than 40% last month. That's huge. That's a factor of increase that is unheard of. And the EV market, the hybrid EV market, is seeing a bigger increase than internal combustion engine vehicles. For example, EVs were up 46.9%. Non-hybrid, non-electric vehicles were up 34%. So all used cars are up in value, but hybrids and EVs are up more. Now, some of it has to do with the gas price situation in the U.S. with inflation of fuel prices, but some of it is also more adoption of the electric vehicle platform. And this information comes from IC Cars, and we've featured them before. The big takeaway is hybrids and electric vehicles are making headway in the used car market in addition to the new car market. One of the biggest factors in used cars is the status of the battery. Where on a regular internal combustion gasoline engine, mileage on the odometer is a good indication of what the status of that vehicle is, what the condition of that vehicle is. Yeah, you're going to want to do a check on the vehicle to make sure the engine's good, transmission's good, have a mechanic inspect the vehicle, or have it be certified by a new car dealer. But on hybrid or electric vehicles, the most valuable or expensive component is the battery. And that battery may have a condition variation different than the mileage on the odometer, because a lot of it has to do with heat, how many times it's charged. Does it use a fast charger or a trickle charger? Is it run down to zero frequently? Is it parked at full charge in high temperature? Is it used in cold temperatures? Those factors have more of an effect on electric vehicle batteries than just the calendar time, like model year, or the mileage. The cycle history is much more important than the calendar history. So for electric vehicles, be aware that the prices are going up, but buyers need to start adopting different criteria for evaluating the condition of hybrids than what we've all been used to for the last 50 years on internal combustion gasoline engines, looking at mileage on the odometer, maybe checking compression on the cylinders, maybe checking some other physical components of the engine. You remember, an internal combustion engine has many, many moving parts, internally lubricated parts. It's a very high heat, high pressure, high stress environment, an internal combustion engine. It's a reciprocating engine, so there are massive metal parts moving back and forth at high rates of speed and changing directions frequently, with metal bearings that take friction. And that engine operates at 2,000 or 3,000 RPMs. That's revolutions per minute. Thousands of revolutions per minute. Times an hour's driving, times years. There are millions and millions of cycles of that engine, of metal parts scraping against each other. It's amazing that they last as long as they do. An electric vehicle has none of those parts. It's got an electric motor, not an engine, that does not have reciprocating parts. It doesn't go back and forth. There's not high stress, high friction. There's not explosions inside the engine. An internal combustion engine literally means combustion. There are explosions that happen in an engine. An EV doesn't have that, but The battery is where all the stress happens. The charging and discharging of that battery is where the stress and pressure and physical changes happen. And that battery, in some vehicles represents half the value of the vehicle. So you want to make sure the battery is up to snuff and can last a long time. And there's ways to check that out in advance other than just looking at the mileage. So the takeaway is vehicle prices continue to go up in the used car market. Plan accordingly as a consumer in either buying or selling a vehicle to make sure that your future plans for keeping your vehicle you have or buying a new vehicle or selling a vehicle that you might see at the top of its value range.